Hi folks, good morning. This is Jim Hodson. I'm here at the Fort Worth Aviation Museum, home to the most touchable warbirds in Texas. It is September 23rd, 2020, and we're inside again today. So if there's some issues with the sound, please let me know. But there's nothing turned on here today, so we hope that this is all going to work out just fine. So our guest for today is our Director of Museum Operations, Brittany Spraggins. Hi, Brittany.
Hi.
This is another episode that we wanted to do on women in aviation. And I can't tell whether your mic is on or not, so...
I think I just clicked it.
Okay, so if any of you are having trouble hearing Brittany, let me know, because we can't tell from the mic whether it's turned on or turned off. So at any rate, we're here. We're going to talk a little bit about how Brittany got into the aviation business. We were talking about that a little bit before, but hi, Mike. Good to see you. Just tell me, when did you first decide that you thought you might want to work in museums?
I'd always liked museums as a kid. I loved the idea of alternative learning.
Okay.
I didn't hate school, but I always liked the idea of not learning in a school environment. But I had no idea how to get involved in museums until I was in college, and I was actually signing up for classes in undergrad, and I saw that museum science was an option, but only for grad school, and that's how I Googled it, and then I started looking at, oh, this is a possible avenue.
Okay. And you went to Texas Tech, right?
Yes, Texas Tech for undergrad and grad.
So, but you didn't go to Texas Tech with the idea that they've got a museum science program and that's what I want to go do.
No, I went, I originally wanted to be a psychologist, but did not want to go through to my PhD because I was getting burnt out on school.
Okay.
And so I did history, which was my other love.
Okay.
I knew I wanted to do something with history that was not, I didn't want to be a teacher, but I wanted to somehow be involved in education and alternative learning, and then it kind of luckily blossomed into the perfect program for me.
Okay, so when you saw that there was a museum program, that seemed to be the way for you to not be a teacher in a classroom, but still be involved in educating and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So what did you find most interesting about your museum program?
It took about 10 years off of my life.
Really?
It was
Okay.
very stressful for
Okay.
me, but it was an amazing program. It was really small, and it's one of the oldest and best programs in the country for museum science. It's also in person, where most graduate programs for museum science are online or their certificates.
Okay.
And this one, you have in-museum experience, and that was one of the biggest things for me. Is
Okay.
to work in the museum while I was in school.
So did you have an opportunity when you were there to decide whether you were going to do collections or management or different aspects of museum business?
So when you start in the program, they let you decide which area you're interested in. There was administration, there was exhibits, there was registrar collections in the different departments. I started out in the natural science lab, so I worked with all of the animals, and they call it bats and rats because it's mostly mammals.
Bats and rats.
And then I moved to the registrar's area to get a little bit more experience in the entire museum.
Okay. So at any point in time while you're going to school there, did you think, I want to work for an aviation museum?
It did not cross my mind.
Okay.
For some reason, I had originally planned on going to a natural science museum. That was my first choice originally, but then those are few and far between,
Okay.
unfortunately, and often it's better to have a PhD in those kind of museums, but that's okay.
Okay. So did you have any background in aviation before you came to us?
Sort of.
Sort of?
Both my grandfathers worked at the plant during World War II. One eventually became a B-52 pilot, and my father was a pilot recreationally for most of his life. And I took my first flight when I was 3 days old.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, they
Okay.
dropped my mom off at home, and he took me to Sycamore Airfield, I think.
Okay.
And we went on the
Okay.
plane.
Now, and your mother worked for American Airlines, correct?
Yes, she worked in the lost baggage area as a professional witness for them. It was a very interesting job,
Okay.
but that also afforded me time to spend a lot of time traveling on bigger airplanes
Okay.
where I got the recreational side from my dad.
So you had a peripheral association with aviation, so it wasn't completely new
Yeah,
to
I
you.
spent more time around airplanes than the average person, but less than someone who actually flew in them. I
Yeah.
probably spent my first 15 Octobers at a Lions Air Show.
Try pressing your button. Donna is saying that she's having trouble hearing you. So. Okay. Okay. Do you hear now? Donna, do you hear Brittany now? Testing, testing.
Donna?
Okay, I'm not getting anything back from her, but you press the button the other way, right?
Yes, it looks like it's down.
Okay, good. We'll see what happens there. If we need to, I'm going to slide this other mic over toward you, so maybe we'll have two sources. So I'll just talk louder. So, at any rate, says you're not speaking. Actually, she is. She's doing very well. We gave her the other mic now, so maybe that's going to help. So, at any rate, Mike says he can hear pretty good. So, okay, so one of us can hear, somebody can't. So we're going to just continue to press here. Were we the first time that you were ever even thought that you were going to be involved in an aviation museum?
I think so. When I started applying for jobs after grad school, I was applying to any kind of museum. I wasn't really thinking not realistic.
Yeah.
But my dad knew Tom and wanted me to volunteer out here or volunteer at another museum, and then it kind of snowballed into the perfect situation.
Okay, good. So I know, and we just kind of threw you in head first, and it was kind of immersion training on some of it. But and I know going to school, you're usually talking about bigger museums and that kind of thing, as opposed to us, and we're probably. Donna says she can hear you better now, so we're all good. I guess most museums are really small museums, mm-hmm. and so we're probably not unusual from that standpoint. But what have you learned? Because you've been with us almost 4 years now. Is it almost 5 now? Because we're in between. 4.5. So, what have you learned about working in a small museum since you've in the time that you've been with us now?
I'd say the major thing is go with the flow. It is not going to be exactly how you planned it or how you expected it to be, and to just go with the flow and work with it as best you can. In school, they teach you about museums and best practices, and that's just, for the Smithsonian, that's easy, but for a smaller museum like most are, you're working with what you have, and that's been huge. It was a transition at first, but it's way more realistic.
So you had a big learning curve here, though, just with learning about aviation, mm-hmm. as well as small museums. So, do you think that that what you did at Tech really prepared you for this job that you have now with us?
I would say it prepared me overall for the museum experience, but definitely not for the aviation part. There is nothing to do with airplanes at the Museum of Texas Tech, and so all I had was I can recognize what some look like based on being around from my dad, but past that, that was a huge learning curve.
Okay. Well, and that's something that with all of us that continues. I mean, we learn new things here all the time. What was the biggest surprise to you after you started to work here for a while?
I was a little surprised with how much I was going to be dealing with the public. When we talked about it, I originally be coming in and working with collections, and then also some other things, but I expected it more to be a back of house job, not a public face job. Which it's not bad surprise, it's just wasn't expecting.
No, I get that. And I know we talked about that when you first came in, because we talked about some management principles, because they didn't tell you a lot about the business side.
Yeah.
Or at least you didn't study that portion of it. And so you've come a long way with that and reading financial sheets and that type of thing. What has been the most rewarding for you in terms of learning about aviation here, or our role in the aviation history bit here?
I think the most rewarding part is working with what I feel is like undervalued history, especially in the area. If it weren't for us, who would be preserving this? And I feel like that's a really important place to be in like the chain of museums. It's not like the Smithsonian or larger museums where there are probably other people who are talking about dinosaurs as well, but we are the only one that's speaking our story, and I think that's really important because nobody else will do anything for us.
What have you found most interesting about our story that you didn't know about before you came here?
I had no idea what a fact was.
Okay.
I think that's very interesting, and the hit my smoke and all that kind of stuff. very
forward air
interesting.
controllers.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Very interesting way to do it. And I also didn't know about Bessie Coleman.
Okay.
Even though that's one of the only questions on the tax now for kids. And I just love badass female pilots, of course.
Okay.
So it was really interesting to learn about her story.
Okay. What are some of the things that, and we're going to just ask this, what are some of the things that you haven't enjoyed, or that you look at and you say this thing that I did, or the thing we were involved in was not a good experience, but I learned from that?
The business side is really more of the things that they may not be something I enjoy, but
Okay.
I've learned from it. The dealing with volunteers, because we don't do that in grad school as much. And like you said, the financial sheets, those things, I may not enjoy it, but I definitely needed to learn, and it's beneficial.
What's the most rewarding thing that you do here, or that you have done here? If it's one particular instance or encounter with somebody, or what's been one of the more rewarding things that's happened for you here?
I would say it is probably the World War I exhibits.
Okay.
That was my first real, I guess, foray into completely managing an exhibit, and the fact that it's something that nobody knows anything about here, and there were a lot of things I didn't know about it, and it's a very interesting topic as well. I really enjoyed working on that.
Well, it had a huge background, or a huge impetus or catalyst for aviation here in North Texas, and yeah, I like your thought about the undertold or the underappreciated, because there's so much here. We often talk about people are walking on history here, and they don't even they aren't even aware of that. So, if you had the ability to do some other things here because we had more money or more space or whatever, what would you do in terms of aviation history or aviation education or distance learning or any of those things? What would you be doing, or what would you like to see us be able to do?
Well, before COVID, most of you all know that we started STEM Saturdays, and I was really hoping that we would get some STEM Saturdays off the ground, and it would become a really big event. STEM is a huge deal right now, and especially when we had the STEM for Girls program, I would have loved to expand that and started with that. Unfortunately, money and COVID made those very difficult to do, but I would like to get back to those one day when we can.
Well, and we may be able to do that, a little bit of that with some of these Facebook Live things. I think we've got some opportunities to do that. I mean, that's one of the things through COVID that we weren't doing before, and frankly is helping us stay on the map here. George Everett is saying howdy y'all. Chicken George is here. Glad to have you with us again, George. So let's just talk a little bit more about women in aviation, women in STEM. How do you see that we can help women come into this field, whether it be aviation in the broader sense of pilot, crew members, mechanics, or just in the peripheral sense, logistics, administration, education?
I would say it would probably be great to nobody knows what you can do. The same thing I had never thought about this being my job. Nobody knows how you can get involved with it. That's not being a pilot, being in the crew, all of that kind of stuff, being in the military. There are ways to be working with and around aviation. And I think that just getting that out there is really important, letting them know that there are other options. As well as STEM, when I was growing up, STEM was not a big thing, and it was definitely not encouraged in women. And so anytime we can do that and encourage women to be in the STEM fields is amazing to me.
What fascinates you about aviation?
It sounds silly, but when watching planes fly, I find very majestic. And so like when we're at the air show, seeing the blues and getting like chills on my arms and things, they're just really beautiful to see. That's probably one of my favorite things. It sounds weird, but...
No, it's not weird. I mean, you can always tell the people who are interested in aviation because they hear the sound and you see people looking up all the time. So let's see, we've got a bunch of people here online. If anybody's got a question for Brittany, we're open to talking about that, whether it be her studies at Texas Tech or what she's doing here at the museum. And one of the other things I want everybody to be aware of is that Brittany came to us as part of a program that we started to get the museum certified by the United States Air Force Museum, because we had been looking for a long time to be able to acquire some Air Force airplanes, and part of that certification process is having a museum professional on staff, which we've never had here before. And so it was a big deal for us to be able to cut out a piece of our budget so that we could afford to bring someone into the museum, so that we would then have access to that. And so Brittany has filled that role very well for us. She's not just a placeholder, though, because she's done a lot here for us. In many respects, she's our conscience and tries to keep us on the straight and narrow, because we have ideas about things we'd like to do at times, and she'll go, no, we can't do it that way, or consider doing it this way. So she has a very key role here. And one of the other things is we hired her because we needed someone to fill that position and be able to check that box on the certificate. But her assistance here, her involvement here, her participation here has become far more valuable to us than just being an X in a box so that we could get an airplane. But when you come out and look at the YF-16, you can look at that all day long and keep in mind that if it were not for Brittany being here and the things she's done to help us progress along, that airplane wouldn't be here. So anything else that you'd like to mention about your job or aviation or the people you work with, or any of the things here right now? Because we're really getting down to the last couple of minutes.
I would say, especially for any, just being the Women in Aviation series, it can be intimidating coming into a job that is almost completely male and older, but it's worth it. If you find a job that you really like, that type of situation it's not a problem. And if you find something like that, go for it anyway, even if you feel intimidated. It's worth it.
Go for it. It's worth it. Okay, I think those are pretty good words that we can end this on. Haven't seen any questions. That's okay. I guess you've answered everybody's questions, and I think you've done a great job here today. So we're glad to have you with us. Don't know what we're going to be doing on Saturday yet, but we will be doing something. Gary will be back with us. His home chores are done, so he's going to be back, and we will do something on Saturday. Again, thanks for checking in with us today. And again, from the Fort Worth Aviation Museum, this is Jim Hodson and Brittany Spraggins, and we'd like to thank you, and everybody stay safe. We are open Saturday from 9 until 2. Appreciate if you get your tickets ahead of time. We are social distancing and masks inside the museum, but we are open inside. So thank you, Brittany.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.